Hey there, it's attorney Mike Goldstein with the Law Firm Ignite podcast. I'm so happy that all of you attorneys and legal marketers have tuned in today and that you're really excited, you're pumped to expand your practice, to figure out what it is that you can do to grow it. And we are so lucky today because with us, we have one of the foremost experts on really how to answer your phone, how to follow up with people on the phone. We've got James King Baskin with us from Outsource Kings. We're going to bring him in just a minute and talk to him. And we're going to find out really what some of the tips are, what are the things that you need to do in order to better train your people, or really if you're going to hire somebody to bring them in to answer, to do lead follow-up so that you can improve your lead flow and you can improve your conversion rate. And we're going to do all of that just after this. Hey, James, how are you?
Mike, doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join us here today on the podcast. It was really nice of you to take the time out to do this. And James, you and I have known each other for a little bit of time here. But for those people who don't know who you are, just take a minute, just tell them, who the heck are you? What is it that you do?
Great question. It's interesting. A lot of people online know what I do, but then personal friends are like, what do you do? So I run a company called Outsource Kings. We have about 15 people that work for me, all remote overseas. And we answer phones for local businesses and marketers as well. And then we do the lead follow-up for them and for their clients. Setting appointments, answering phone calls, setting appointments, outbound and inbound.
That's great. And I imagine as part of what you guys do, you talk with a lot of different business owners about what are the things that, that everyone is finding is helping out when you answer the phones and when you follow up with people. And I know you've done some coaching as well, and you've been able to kind of actually work with people to help them kind of get people in place to do that lead follow-up, to answer the phones. And one of the things that a lot of people, they don't realize is the way that your phone etiquette and the way that you answer, the way you follow up has a direct impact on your conversions. I know that's something you really have a strong expertise in. How they're working, and really, how do you train somebody to really improve your client retention? And when we're talking client retention, obviously with attorneys, we're talking about, I want to get retained as the bankruptcy lawyer. I want to get retained as the criminal defense lawyer for this person. Lots of times people raise their hands, but after the hand is raised, you still got to close that deal. You still got to sell them, and you got to get the appointment with them. And very rarely are the attorneys who are listening to this the ones who answer their own phones. Even less likely are they to be the ones to call someone to set an appointment to come in. And that's where, the service that you provide comes in. But more importantly, for those people who are going to hire their own or build their own in-house staff, what it is that they do. So with that said, let me just kind of jump into this here. What do you think are the top skills that really an appointment setter needs to have when working with someone in the professional services like a law firm?
Yeah, proactive approach, goal-focused, and process-oriented would probably be the big three that I would say. Able to follow instructions, and then probably also able to receive criticism would be also as well.
Yeah, I imagine too, when you're dealing with somebody in the legal space, in the medical space, in any kind of like a professional services, high emotional impact. You get people on the phone who they're not calling to fix the plumbing in the house, or they're not calling to buy a widget. And I'm sure, I think the appointment setters, they've got to kind of have a little bit of a thick skin sometimes, because people are we're talking about, I'm losing my house to foreclosure, or my wife was just arrested, or something like that. It's those appointment setters are they got to be a little bit of so the thing is, it seems like I think the people who are answering the phone and following up, they almost become unlicensed therapists sometimes for a few minutes, and they got to be ready for that. So James, one of the things that I wanted to kind of find out from you is, like, can you give me some real life examples of communication techniques that you've seen that are really effective for engaging potential clients over the phone?
Yeah, so one of the things that I work on teaching my team leaders as well as my employees to do is mirroring techniques. Chris Voss, as some people know, mirroring back the words that the people say over the phone. to them with a question. So, Mrs. Jones, to make sure I get that right, you were talking about XYZ and you needed help with this and that, and you're repeating back the things that they said. So, that's one thing that I like to have my team do in terms of effective communication.
That's really good. And do you train them on that? Like, do you do any kind of role playing? I mean, or do you like how do you get someone to really think in that way that they want to mirror something and that it becomes second nature to them?
Yeah, it's very manual in terms of time intensive with myself when I do that, because it is going to be at least a 30-minute to an hour phone call with an employee where I'm practicing with them and I'm repeating back to them, and I'm then having them. So we'll have one person be the agent on the phone and the other person be the prospect, and then I'll flip flop. I'll be the prospect, they'll be the agent, then I'll be the agent, they'll be the prospect, and then we role play in that aspect, both sides.
And so that kind of leads me into kind of my next question, which is really, you got to train these people who are answering the phones and who are following up. Obviously, they don't you don't just hire them on day one. I don't just put an ad onto LinkedIn and say, hey, looking for receptionists to come into my law firm and schedule appointments. They've got to know what to do. So with that in mind, what are the initial steps that you take when training a new phone screeners? And can you give me some examples of how this process has worked well?
Yeah, the first thing that I do is I have them submit a video application. I review that video application. I want to hear how they sound. Did they follow instructions? Then I'll schedule an interview with them. From there, I'll do an interview, and then I will do a second interview. But after the first interview, I actually ask them to send me uh, a message after our chat. And if they don't send me a message, I don't ever contact them again. And then that message basically shows that they were interested in the job interview. Because sometimes people aren't, and they just think like, oh, hey, this company's going to call me back. So I literally tell them, hey, send me an audio message. Really sell yourself, but take your time to send me this audio message. But send me an audio message, and here's my phone number. I always give them my phone number. My WhatsApp is what I usually do. And send me an audio message with why I should hire you. And take your time, but get this done by the end of today. And then if they don't follow that instruction and I never hear from them, I'm never going to contact them.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think just giving out that homework assignment initially shows whether or not someone has, not just whether they're interested, but whether they pay attention to details. Because when you're talking on the phone, you're talking about mirroring and things like that, you've got to pay attention to what someone says. I know in the past, one of the things that I've noticed what a lot of people on the phone do is they have a script and they don't deviate. And it doesn't matter what somebody says. And when you do that, and especially in the legal field, when you're dealing with somebody who's emotional to begin with, and they feel like you're just reading a script to them, and they don't want to engage with you. So having that attention to detail is really critical. And that's really good advice that you're giving there. So moving on from once that you have given them this homework, once they responded, they've done the video, would you say that would be any different in the event that this was somebody in person? Like, would you change anything if they were coming into your office to interview?
Great question. I've done in-person interviews early on when I was living down in Columbia in the beginning. I had people actually come to my house very, very early on. I haven't done that in years. One of the things that I looked for, and I actually met up with a guy last year, so I still do meetings with people if I'm available. I look for how they focus. So what I mean by that, body cues. It's very easy on a Zoom call to have attention with someone. It's very easy to, you could have a thing come across, your phone, or have to take a drink of water. But in person, you can't hide any of that stuff. So in person, you can see all that stuff. In person, I can see how they react. I can see how they treat other people. if they're visiting an office, that kind of thing. But I think I would still ask the same exact questions, and I think I already have in the past. But one thing that I've done is I'll do not in office in person, but I'll just meet someone for coffee, and I want to see how they are in a social setting, and that's probably pretty much the same thing.
So let's take it to the next level though. So you've interviewed somebody, you determined that it's going to be a good fit. So I want you to start answering the phones for me, or I want you to follow
Yep.
up on leads for me. Um, what would be a good way? Like, how do you train people to really start answering the phones? And I mean, what is a successful opening line for an appointment setter? What should that look like?
Yeah. It's repeating back the information that they give, their name, and why they call.
So you're saying that, I mean, there's certain ways to answer the phone. There's certain kind of lines. Like,
Yeah, so
how does
introduce
that look? And does it change for someone in the professional services versus somebody maybe who's more of a blue collar type of, you're answering for a different type of company?
Yeah, for professional services, it's introducing themselves, the name of the company that they've contacted, and asking them how they can help. At the end of the day, it's all about how we can help and if we're able to help. And then it's also more listening in that aspect. We've done medical, we've done legal, and with medical and legal, a lot of it is listening and making sure that the person qualifies after we listen, right? Because we wouldn't want to bring in someone into the office that's not a fit versus booking someone into an appointment just to book an appointment to have a potential sit, so to speak. So the difference is with an in-office visit, it's a few things. It's, introducing the name of the office that they've contacted, the name of the person that is speaking, and then listening to the person. Another key difference or big thing is making sure the person knows where the office is located at if they're going to visit, to make sure that they can arrive there. You'd be surprised how lost people get, especially if it's in an office complex or suite number. I know for a fact that I've booked appointments before, and I go to their office complex, and it is like a maze. There's office A, there's office B, there's suite 2, there's suite 3, and I'm already like 10 minutes early, and now all of a sudden I'm like, dude, I'm gonna be late to this appointment. Do I even want to go to this appointment? And so then it's like, if a person's in that frame of mind, we want to kind of already preset them on where to go when they arrive at the location so that they can actually make their appointment. That's a big thing also in terms of making sure that they find the location.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're talking about really just making sure that the appointment setters are making someone feel comfortable.
Mhm.
They don't.
Yep.
And that's really key. And thinking about that, like, how do you have appointment setters effectively gather information from a potential client so that they don't feel so overwhelmed on the call?
Yeah, so they always have Notepad open and they're always taking notes down and then asking questions along with it. So that is where it is important to have not so much a script, but a framework, as I like to call it, to where they're info gathering and they follow the framework.
Yeah, I said, so what are some common mistakes that you see appointment setters make during initial calls, and like, how do you avoid those mistakes?
Yeah, I think one thing also is sometimes we almost get too empathetic with people that we buy into their whole entire story. And what I mean by that is that we get so involved in what they're talking about and trying to assist them that we lose sight of the focus, which is, hey, you know what? This person has to be qualified. And that's a human thing, right? It's like someone calls in and like their nightmare of a thing going on in their life. Meanwhile, law practice really can't help them. And this could be multiple reasons, maybe for whatever purpose. We did one with a big class action, and had all these people that said they had a case, said they had documentation, had DocuSign for medical records, etc. But they didn't fit the mold for what qualified for the case of the class action. So it's like at that point, we're almost wasting time there now with that person. And so it's like, but at the same time, it's like you don't want to tell that person like go away. So now it's like, how do you, in the nicest way, let this person know, like, hey, that's really unfortunate that you were involved in XYZ, but unfortunately, it does not fit the criteria for what we can use to move forward with the case for you. And so that's something you can see appointment setters.
Well, that's, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, James, when you're talking about avoiding these mistakes and kind of, making sure that you put people in the right mindset. In terms of, we're talking a lot about in terms of answering calls, but what about like when somebody actually an inbound lead comes in and now you got to follow up with these. And this is going to happen a lot. We're running local service ads and you should answer the phone, but if you don't, and someone leaves a message, you got to get back to them. They fill out a form on your site. What is the ideal time frame for following up with a lead after that initial contact? And then also, if someone says, "Hey, can you call me back?" Like, what does that time frame look like to you, so that we're not harassing somebody, but we are still doing our job in setting those appointments?
Yeah, of course, following up instantly would be ideal, but 5 to 10 minutes, I think, is very realistic also. And then in terms of what we call a callback, it's asking the person, hey, you want us to call you back? When would you like us to call you back? Oh, after 3:00 tomorrow. Okay. And then documenting that and then actually following through with that. You'd be surprised how many people like we contact and they weren't expecting that actual follow-up, even though they kind of pushed it off till tomorrow. And then they might push it off again. And then the fact that someone's consistently following up when they say, call me back, then it finds out if they're actually interested. But yeah, so documenting it and asking them when to follow up, and 5 to 10 minutes, would be an ideal lead response time. Under 5 minutes would be the perfect one, but 5 to 10 minutes is more realistic sometimes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And when you're getting on that initial call and when you're following up right away, how can the appointment setters personalize the follow-up calls to increase the chances of booking the consultation?
Yeah, asking the person their name and why they're calling and how they can help them. Basically, not so much how they can help them, but ask them why they're calling, and then seeing if they can help them.
Yeah, it sounds like, you want to build a little bit of a rapport, at least initially, just so it doesn't feel like you're just an order taker, but rather you're engaged with whatever their problem in life is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So kind of moving on to, following in that same flow is like, what are some effective methods for tracking and managing these follow-up calls?
Yeah, so gonna be a little bit hard for me to explain over audio, but we have a sheet that we use. It's very simple. It's a Google sheet that's been customized, and basically it has drop downs for each level of follow-up number, and it's numbered as well. And so the drop downs are anything from appointment, reschedule, not interested, callback, no answer, routed the voicemail, and we use that sheet as kind of like our Bible, so to speak, of keeping track of all the follow-ups we've done. And then that's like our 1,000-foot overview. And then the microscope is the CRM for the client, where we keep track of everything in the CRM.
Right. So it obviously makes sense to track everything. It makes sense to follow up, like you've said. It makes sense to build rapport. One of the things that I know appointment setters get a lot of times, or anyone who's, especially, you're calling a warm lead, is they're not quite ready to book that consultation and they have a lot of objections. How do you train someone who's going to be doing all this lead follow-up to handle objections? And whether it's a common one or even if it's something that maybe they've never even heard before.
Yeah. I always tell my team, if you don't know something, it's okay if you don't know something. But at the same point, you want to make the person feel like that they're heard and that they're going to get an answer. So one of the things is telling the person, hey, I don't have that information in front of me. What I can do is I can get with my boss and then he can get you that information back. And then moving forward with the script, proceed as planned, and letting the person know. you don't have to say, oh, I don't know how to do that kind of thing. But there's a way to say it, like, hey, I don't have that information to help you best answer that. What I can do is I can get you in contact with someone that can. And that's very realistic in life. It's like sometimes people will ask something that you don't know, and letting them know, hey, you know what? I don't know that answer, but I can get you back with someone that can. And then either a live transfer or getting in touch with the person and then bringing that question up and then documenting that for the future.
That's great advice there. Um, so you've identified that sometimes you've got to deal with objections, right? Sometimes and you point them in the right direction. But I think one of the underlying issues sometimes is somebody has an objection because they have a concern about the type of service that they're looking for. They've had a bad experience in the past. Maybe they've got an urgent situation has to be dealt with. Whatever the underlying concern is, how can appointment centers identify those underlying concerns of hesitant leads, and how can what can they do to really use that information once they have that to help convert the person into a consult?
Man, that might be the most challenging question you've asked so far. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, you get people, and I know exactly what this looks like for legal. You get people that don't want to give their information out. They don't want to, like, they kind of like shut down. And I've always taken the approach of direct confrontation. Hey, ma'am, we need to get this information in order to help you. If we don't get this information, we cannot help you. And that does cause people to hang up. That does call people to, say they're no longer interested. But then the people that actually have a legit claim or are interested, they're like, okay, here's my address. Okay, here's my email and here's my information about my case. Because you get these people that are hesitant, not so much on the inbound, but on the outbound calling, that they don't want to answer questions, or we had one where a DocuSign got sent out, and go figure, the DocuSign link was expired. So right away they were like, oh, this is not legit, and had nothing to do with us. But then it went back to us to have to get a new DocuSign link out. So basically it was, hey, we just told them, hey, links expire. Sorry we sent that out, but if you're still interested in this case and you still, want to file, we're here to help you. And, more than happy to answer any questions that you have, but we do need you to fill this out. So it's kind of like you got to push on them versus let them answer. Is you got to push on them is the best way to explain that.
That makes sense. So you've really given us a lot to think about today in terms of training, in terms of what to look for, in terms of what someone should be saying on the phone and all that. I think one big question that a lot of business owners have, certainly a lot of small law practices, maybe there's only one or two attorneys in the practice, and you have a receptionist, but their job is really not to. They're more of a paralegal than a receptionist, right? When do you bring somebody in-house? When do you do this yourself versus when should someone contract with an appointment setting agency like yourself? What is that?
Yeah, great question as well. I think when the call volume is at a point where, how to explain this, revenue equals that you can hire someone internally to do it for yourself versus an outside organization like myself. And we have a program where we even teach people how to build it in-house, because we know that people eventually will build it in-house. So I think it's both revenue forecast as well as call volume. So in the beginning, it's like you got all these calls coming in from lead sources, and then maybe at some point it equals your business is mostly referrals. That's something also that when we know when we're working with a client and we're seeing that most of their stuff is no longer lead generation, it's all referrals. Most of the time they're gonna bring it in house, because we know that they're not working with a marketing organization anymore. Now they're doing everything internally, and they're at a point now where it's like they just get business on demand, and then they build it internally. That's kind of when we notice that.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think a big part of it also though is if you're not marketing, you're not growing. So if you're not growing, you don't need that strong kind of follow up anymore. Now it's just referrals are a lot easier to close, and that's the bottom line for sure. So James, you really dropped some great knowledge bombs on us. I mean, there's some real gold in here, and I hope that everyone who's listening is really taking notes and is kind of thinking about, does it make sense for me to better train my people? Does it make sense to outsource this and get a pro in here to do it and all of that? With the last few minutes we have left, if someone, they listen to this and, if they're not a law firm Ignite client and, they're looking just to bring somebody on to do phone answering and follow up and all that, how would they get a hold of you? How do they find you and your company?
Yeah, outsourcekings.com or on Facebook, James King Baskin.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, James. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, for sharing some of your expertise and the things that you've seen in this. And I'm sure that everyone who's listening is getting a lot of value out of this. So with that said, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening today. This is Attorney Michael Goldstein for James King Baskin. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. See ya.